First-time homebuyers and retirees are in trouble right now, guys. In fact, there was an article today talking about how many retirees are going to have to come out of retirement and go back to work due to rising inflation. Now, the prices of everything were already pretty high before inflation started taking off. And that's just a reality. The cost of living's been going up. It usually goes up, it never goes down. And that's before all the money printing. It's before inflation going up to an unknown number. So that's happening, guys. And according to this article, it says that the average household income that has at least one adult that's 65 years or older living in it makes $44,000 per year, guys. Now, that's not like poor, but with the way things are going, the cost of gas prices and food, rent, taxes, everything going up, I don't know if you can live off of that anymore. That's really what the issue is right now. Check this out. House for sale. You know, I'll put up the info for you guys and see what's going on here. I feel like this house has been for sale for a long time. I'm right over here by the middle school in Miami Beach, and every time I drive by here, I want to say that I see the for sale sign in this house in their yard. So I don't know. We'll see what's the deal with this house. And apparently they're building a brand new one right next door. Got all the building permit stuff here. Interesting stuff. Now, on the one hand, this makes me sad that retirees are going to have to go back to work because of rising inflation. But on the other hand, we're all suffering when it comes to this. You know, we're all having to pay more for everything. From that point of view, the retirees aren't any different than us. I'm just seeing so many interesting things on this walk. You guys hear that wind chime? Must get nuts out here when it gets windy. I don't need any sunglasses today because I'm walking here close to sunset, so it's not so bright out anymore. Now, the next thing is first-time homebuyers, guys, are in big trouble because basically for the first time ever that I can think of, they're really out of options, okay? If you think about it, first-time homebuyers typically want to buy a starter home, something cheap, something affordable that they can, you know, call home for at least the next 5 to 7 years, maybe start a family, who knows, right? That's kind of like what a lot of first-time homebuyers are looking at. And a lot of them are wondering if I can still buy right now. Is it still a good time to buy, even though we have these rising rates and everything crazy like that that's going on? And the experts out there are telling people, well, first of all, there's no guarantee that home prices will go down. Well, yes and no. It depends on where you live, because we're going to get to that a little bit later in the video, because there are actually a lot of cities where prices are going down significantly right now. But we'll get to that in a bit. So first of all, it depends on where you live. If you're a first-time home buyer, if right now's a good time for you to be looking at buying, you know, based on what's happening in your market. So that's the first thing. Now, the next thing that these experts use as an argument that you might want to buy now instead of later is the fact that interest rates are going to continue going up. So it's just going to decrease, you know, your purchasing power over time, which is very true. Now, I totally agree with that. Interest rates are going to keep deteriorating your purchasing power as a buyer, whether you're a first-time buyer or not. But if prices do go down, then that should help you out, because even though the rates are higher, then you should be looking at a similar monthly payment, you know, versus a lower rate and a higher price. And if you guys have watched my videos before, you know that I would definitely prefer if you bought a house at a higher interest rate but a lower purchase price, so that one day when those rates do go down, who cares if it's 10 years from now, you can actually refinance and significantly lower your monthly payment, because by then you'll have more equity in the home and you'll be able to lower your monthly payment. It'd probably be cut in half by that point with a lower rate. And imagine, you know, if you get a 6.5% rate today, and in the future you can get a rate again in the mid 4s or the low 4s, that's going to have a huge impact on your monthly payment. So think about that. Now, the next argument that this article uses to get first-time home buyers into a place now, sooner rather than later, is that basically when the recession comes, credit can tighten up and lending's going to get more difficult, and it could essentially be a higher barrier to entry to qualify for a mortgage. And I also agree with that. But the thing is, guys, to me, these are all kind of FOMO points that kind of push people into buying now, with so much uncertainty. And that's the biggest issue that I have with buying right now, is just the uncertainty factor. Things are changing very fast right now in the housing market, faster than usual, especially with the interest rates. And these interest rate hikes are designed to make prices go down, okay? This is what it's supposed to do. We're supposed to see prices going down from these rate hikes. So that's the intended effect, along with obviously curbing inflation and things like that. So we just have to wait and see. It's still too soon. I mean, just think about it, guys. They only started doing these interest rate hikes just a few months ago, and we're already seeing massive changes in our economy and in the housing market. So right now, I feel like patience is going to be the number one thing that can reward you when you're looking for a place, whether you're a first-time home buyer or anyone looking to buy. So a little bit of patience might take you a long way. And if you're wondering why I stopped here, it's because I saw another house for rent. Probably some crazy amount too, because there's a Lambo in the driveway. So if you see a Lambo in the driveway, a place like this probably means that you need to make Lambo cash in order to rent a house like this, which is totally crazy, obviously. But this is the world we live in now, apparently. Right now, we're seeing a lot of cities across the country having big price cuts with real estate. And keep in mind, guys, when you hear things like this doesn't mean that it's happening everywhere, okay? A lot of people want to, attack me in the comments and say things like, oh, this isn't happening in my market, blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, it might not be, it's not happening everywhere. But I'm going to tell you where it is happening. There was a list that came out of, the 10 markets that have the most price cuts going on right now. And they're places like Provo, Utah. 47.8% of listings saw price cuts. That's almost half, guys. And mind you, these are going to be in markets that are drastically overheated and housing is just overpriced. But when you're seeing 50% of the houses on the market in a certain area come down in price, this is good news, because this means that the correction or crash, whatever you want to call it, is basically here. And fundamentals are starting to come into play of how much people are willing to pay for a house, and or even how much people are even able to pay for a house right now, especially with the higher interest rates, okay? This is an interesting house. Very cool. The next one, Tacoma, Washington, very similar numbers, 47.7% of listings with price cuts. Denver, 46.9%. Salt Lake City, 45.8%. And then the next few on the list are Sacramento, Boise, Idaho, Ogden, Utah, Portland, Oregon, Philadelphia. All these cities have more than 40% of the homes on the market right now with price cuts. So this is what's going on out there in those markets. So think about this if you're a first-time home buyer, like we discussed earlier. If you live in or around one of these metros and these are one of the areas you're looking at buying in, then maybe you want to wait. Maybe you want to hold off. Now, I personally think, as a longtime real estate agent, that if you live in an area where demand is just so strong, even right now, with all of these interest rate hikes and the crazy high prices, and you're still seeing houses fly off the market, then there's a good chance that that could continue for a little while longer, and it will probably take longer for prices to come down. But there's also a possibility that prices won't come down at all in areas like that. You always have to consider every possibility. And I think anything is possible right now, because nobody thought 2 years ago that we were going to end up where we are right now. So I think the main thing is to keep an open mind and not just like choose sides. This is not a political thing. This is real life, and you need to pay attention to what's happening in your market in order to really make a truly educated decision on if it's a good time to buy for you, okay? And we talked about things in the past, like how long you're gonna hold the property, can you rent it for a profit if you need to move, and things like that. Not gonna get into all that in this video, But those are some first-time home buyer tips for you. And if you live in one of these markets and you've been looking at buying, you should probably wait, because with that many listings with price cuts, you can guarantee prices can be coming down even further in areas like this. Now, Peter Schiff, in case you guys don't know him, maybe you do, maybe you don't, he actually predicted the 2008 recession, and he was pretty much dead on. And he's one of the people right now that is saying that we're definitely going to have another recession, okay, this year or next year. In fact, he's saying that we're already in a recession. And the funny thing that I saw about this is that when you look at the items that he says are good to buy in a recession, is he believes in three big things right now. He likes gold, which I like gold too. But the thing that really got me, which was a kind of a surprise, was he owns a lot of shares in the tobacco company Philip Morris. So he's pretty much banking on the fact that cigarette sales and tobacco sales in general are going to remain strong even throughout the recession. And that probably applies to alcohol and other vices like that as well, which is kind of crazy. That just goes to show you, how nuts we are as humans. We're banking on the fact that other people are going to be basically killing themselves with, all these things during a recession. But it's the truth, these things happen. And it's what people do. This is, I guess, is a human behavior that he predicts is not going to change even as inflation surges and recession hits. And then, of course, the next thing he said that is the best thing to invest in during a recession is agriculture. So maybe if you can find shares in a company that does agriculture, or even, invest in a farm, something like that. People are always going to need food, guys. So that's definitely a very logical one, and I think the gold is as well. And if you want to get really predatory about it, buying shares in things like Philip Morris and stuff like that is his plan. So there's that. Now, pending home sales in May actually went up a tiny little bit, a 0.7%, in fact, to be exact. And a lot of people might think, oh, this is a good thing, whatever, things are turning around. Not really, okay? It's a very small amount of pending sales, so it's not really a big indicator of what's going on out there. And also, pending sales are still down over 13% year over year. So when we look at May 2022 versus 21, it's still down 13%. So obviously, we're still headed for the market correction. And the chief economist over at the National Association of Realtors, Lawrence Yun, he's upset about the way the Fed is handling the housing situation, because he thinks that these interest rate hikes are basically just hurting home buyers and not addressing the real problem, which is the supply side issue. Now, on the one hand, he's correct, because supply and demand is the biggest dynamic that's driving this market right now. But the Fed can't really do anything about, the supply side of things. All they can do is raise interest rates. The Fed doesn't build homes, okay? So that's the first thing. And at least it's starting to curb demand, because we know that mortgage applications are falling off a cliff, and we know that, buyer demand is way down. So it is working from that standpoint, but he's also right that we do need more supply. But I think, once again, that the biggest thing that people aren't talking about out there is how we already have the supply. It's just not for sale. I mean, look at all these houses I'm walking by, guys. How many for sale signs have I seen? I saw one for sale and one for rent. That's not very many compared to how many houses we've walked by already. And that just goes to show you, it's not like these houses aren't out there in the world. They're here, they're available, but they're just not on the market. But one day, these homes will need to change hands for one reason or another. And that's when there will be more supply. One of my viewers, Daniel, I want to thank you for pointing out this idea, because I've been wanting to mention this in one of the videos. He had this awesome idea where, if I can try to explain it somewhat intelligently here in a nutshell, where there would be like a tax incentive for somebody who's selling a home to sell it to an actual person, okay, not a corporation, a real buyer who's going to live in the home, and give that person a nice tax break on the sale of that home, which would essentially be like a deterrent for all these people who have sold to investors over the last few years, because we know that investors have made up roughly 20% of the home sales over the past couple of years, which is a pretty high number. And that's one thing that's very different from right now compared to back in 2008. These big hedge funds and Wall Street were not buying real estate, but now they are. They're actively helping take supply off the market, as well as things like Airbnb, stuff like that. But I like Daniel's idea, because the idea to actually just, incentivize home sellers to sell to a real person, a real buyer that actually needs the home, and for fair market value. That's the other caveat to this, not a bidding war or some crazy overpriced number, to sell it to the person for fair market value and give that person a tax incentive. Now, can our government afford to do this right now? Probably not. Or maybe they just haven't thought of the idea. I don't really know, but maybe if they would have been a little bit smarter about all this money that they printed, they could have put something like that into place before just giving away, billions of dollars to corporations who basically didn't need the money. And, the rest of us got, $2,400 essentially for going through the whole lockdowns and all that stuff. Let me know what you guys think about that. Now, the next thing is that consumer confidence across the country is down in the most recent survey. And a lot of people are not feeling too optimistic about the next 6 months. And basically the things that they're worried about are things like it's going to be tougher to find a job maybe in the next 6 months. They're worried about their pay actually going down instead of going up, as companies tighten up and they start losing money. They're worried about layoffs, and they're worried about overall business conditions, how easy it's going to be to sustain their business through a recession, essentially. So consumer sentiment is down right now because of those things. But the interesting thing about this is consumer sentiment in Florida here, for some reason, during the same month here in June, is actually up. So as the rest of the country is totally worried about things, apparently people in Florida here are feeling pretty good about the future, which I don't know if that's, has anything to do with their actual finances, or if it has something to do with the fact that we just live somewhere where it's sunny and the weather is nice all year, and it just gives people a more positive outlook, which I've talked about a lot in the past in some of my old Florida videos. So who knows what that's all about, because it doesn't explain why Floridians feel so optimistic. It just says that they do. So I think that's kind of funny, because we're definitely facing all the same issues here that everywhere else in the country is facing. We still have pretty close to $5 gasoline here in Miami. We still have higher food prices than ever. Our, price of housing here is basically shot through the roof, just like everywhere else, but even more, particularly here in Florida, because, it's a very desirable place to live. People were pouring into Florida even before the pandemic. So, and now, it's even more. This place looks totally abandoned. I don't know if anybody lives here or what, but when I walk by these old houses like this, I just feel like some of these people have gotten so lucky in the sense that, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, during the last crash, this house would have been worth dirt, maybe a couple $100,000. And now, even in this condition, they could probably get like $800K for it, maybe even more. So it's crazy. Now, if you stuck with me this long and you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel and check out my next video on the screen right over here, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.